If you're trying to drive forward a lot of different client projects at the same time, it can be pretty overwhelming to think about all of that scope of work that you somehow need to get done yourself. If you start your days not knowing exactly what to work on, if you just generally feel overwhelmed by the amount of work you have to do, and if you end up cherry picking tasks to work on, then this video is for you. This is part 3 in my 3-part series, the most important, least talked about features of ClickUp. And today we're focusing on my very favorite way of managing tasks, and that's inside of one master list. That's why ClickUp is different, because you have the power to aggregate data and create combined views of all the tasks that you have to do. A master task list of all of our tasks across all of our clients. I just want to start this video by showing you what I mean in ClickUp. We're not going to waste any time, we're just going to get right into it. So this is the end goal. We have one task list for all of our client tasks, and they're organized by date. And they include a time estimate, so we have an understanding of how many hours we've assigned to ourselves for each day. We can see which client these tasks relate to, and if they're a part of a project, which project that's part of. We can also look ahead to the other days of the week and look to anticipate if we've assigned too much time to ourselves on any given day, and we can move deadlines out if necessary. And you can time block your day that way. You can decide when you're going to work on certain things and group certain types of work together. You have all the control with this setup. Now, this is something I came up with so I didn't have to look at my projects and client work like this, because I find this super overwhelming, and a lot of project management tools, this is how you end up looking at your work, and it just doesn't work, and you're not likely to stick with it. Now, the key to making this work is having all of your client work grouped into a single space, and that is so that we can aggregate all of our client work tasks into a single list. Now, the key to understanding how this works is to go back to part 1. This is a 7-minute video explaining the ClickUp hierarchy in a way that actually makes sense, and you can't skip this step. So please go back and watch that if you haven't already. So you need to have all of your client work grouped into a single space, but you also need to set up your projects correctly inside of ClickUp using milestones. To explain more about that, go back to video 2 in this series, which explains why projects are created as milestones, how to do it, and a little bit more about setting up a project management view. For today, we're just focusing on tasks. So with those 2 conditions met, then we have the ability to create a master task list view. The bread and butter of this view is this little feature here, how we choose to look at our subtasks. Now, if you remember, subtasks are just steps that we're taking in a project. But if we don't want to look at them in relation to the project, we want to just look at them as our daily to-dos, then we need to ask ClickUp to show them as separate tasks. But what we do so that we always know what project each task is associated with while we're working on it, we can choose to include the parent task name inside of our list view. I also like to include the folder location so that we have our client name. Remember, this is a master task list of all of our client work across all of our clients. You're going to have tasks from all sorts of different projects and clients, and it's good to have that little bit of context when you're working on things. So we do that by adding in the task locations and subtask parent names and just toggling on those features inside of our list options. The second piece to this oh so beautiful view that I'm obsessed with clearly is the group by option. I like to group by due date. And the reason for that is because it gives you these chunks, these daily chunks of the work that you have assigned to yourself for that day. If you're including time estimates inside of your tasks, which I would highly recommend you do and talk more about in part 2 of this series, then you can also include a calculation, like a sum. So you can see, based on how much time each task is going to take you, how many hours of work you have for that day. When we think about planning out our days, like there's a lot of power in that to know exactly how many hours that we need to work if we're good at estimating, but it also gives us the power to look ahead in the week to make sure that we haven't allocated too many hours to ourselves on a certain day and basically set ourselves up for failure. Now, the one caveat to this group by due date is if you have a multi-day task, one that you plan to do a little bit of one day and a little bit more the next day, it will only show up in the due date chunk. So if you're not looking ahead, you might miss it. That's why it's so important to be using both the task view and the project management view. So you can always be looking to the overall progress of your project, so you're driving forward with your individual tasks that you're working on every day. So you're not likely to miss anything if you're staying connected to both. So to recap, in order to get a real handle on your client work across all of your different accounts that you manage, you need to have one master task list that shows you everything that you need to work on by day and how much time you need to allocate to each day. And the only way to do this is to have all of your client work grouped into a single space. By using milestones for our projects, we then can create separate views of just tasks that we need to work on and actual project progress. If you like this video, you're probably gonna love my newsletter. I've dubbed it Unapologetically Organized because the tips I'm sharing are just too good not to share if you're a marketing freelancer. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this series, give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.